Hi everyone, good morning. How are you? Um,
Oh,
can you hear me? Okay, great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
happy Sabbath.
yeah. Happy Sabbath, everyone,
Sabbath.
and thank you for joining our Sabbath class again. We have a great panelist today. Good to see all of you. And although that I've not seen you guys in person for a long time, but it is nice to have this Bible study meeting this morning. So let's have an introduction quickly. Marvin, can you start?
Sure. My name is Marvin Lee. I live here in Bellevue with my family. My girls are off to school, but my son Seth is graduating senior year high school from Issaquah High School.
Nice.
It's great to be a part of the panel.
Thank you. Crystal?
Hi, my name is Christos Palaskas. I just moved to Puyallup, Washington from Kirkland. And here with my family, little baby daughter and a little toddler son. And I'm happy to join this meeting with Koske.
Yeah, thank you. And John, please.
My name is John Choi. I live here in Bellevue. Been here for 20 plus years. Happy to join the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm Kosuke Takahashi. I'm a church member of Eastside SDA Fellowship. I live in the East Side. I live with Fort City, so I live with Far East. But I'm glad to be here. So we have an old man today, and I think primarily because we are talking about Moses. And, it's a different background here that Marvin is our head elder and he's a lawyer. And Crystal and John are tech side, right? You guys are more tech side. I'm a finance guy. So we have a different background, but we're talking about Moses this morning. And this is a kind of the last moment for Moses. We've been studying that basically patriarchs and prophets started from Genesis, and a large part of the time spent lately on that Israelites' exodus from Egypt, guided by Moses. So Moses was a prime figure in this story, and he ended his life in this chapter. So I would like to ask you guys, all of you, the question, what kind of person do you think Moses was? And how do you describe him and his character? Anyone wants to speak up?
Just pick.
Yeah, okay, Crystal.
Okay. I would describe Moses as an aristocrat growing into Pharaoh's yard, in the palaces, and learning lots of the wisdom of the Egyptians, and not being fulfilled by what was around him. That something was lacking. He would still feel not exactly part of that community, as I can say for myself, being a Greek and living in America, you never belong. You are still a foreigner no matter what. So I think that Moses would kind of feel the same, that I am not an Egyptian completely. I have some heritage. So he started developing this love for his people when he didn't belong completely to the Egyptian lifestyle and way of thinking. And then when he got the calling from God, he was not confident in himself. He was just a normal everyday person that needed some kind of proof and help and support from God to take this huge undertaking to lead his nation.
Yep, at the beginning, yes. But how about after that?
After that, I felt that he loved this nation so much he would sacrifice his life or do anything to not let anything happen to them. He got into the way of like, let's say, God's decision to punish them by pleading for them.
Right. Yeah. So he's a kind of guy. He went through so many different stages of life, right? He spent that, as a Pharaoh's son, that the very unusual life in a palace in Egypt, big kingdom. And then that he left that glory, in a sense, worldly glory, and left to that run away to the Midianites life, basically, and spent 40 years in Moab to taking care of the sheep. And then God called him, brought back to Egypt, as you know, and then gave him a mission to guide, huge mission to guide the entire Israelites out from Egypt. So he had so many things went through. Yeah. How about you, Marvin? Do you have any additional comment about Moses?
What struck me about Moses was just his character transformation. Growing up, literally the Prince of Egypt, and feeling like he could do whatever he wanted, even kill that slave master. And then when he realized that he himself could be arrested for murder, in a flash, his life changed from being possibly the next Pharaoh of Egypt to a fugitive. And then he was there in the wilderness for years, just kind of transforming his character. His leadership of the people of Israel is it's staggering that someone could have so much patience, compassion, and love for a people that were so aggravating and rebellious. And in that way, you can see that he's the type of Christ, right? Because as Christos said, he laid down his life. He was fault-free in the eyes of the Lord, and the people deserved to be punished. But he like literally throwing himself in front of God's wrath and saying, no, don't do that. When God was saying, I'm going to take you and save you because you're obedient, but I'm going to punish them. And it really is remarkable what his leadership and his love for the people were.
Yeah. How about you, John?
Well, yeah, I agree. I think that everything said. I think Moses really came from a very different upbringing, right? And privileged upbringing, and then once he realized that his privilege was only given by human power and not by what his blood was, I think he realized that he needed to change his life. Right. And even though he didn't want that responsibility in many ways, he kind of tried to push God away. God always had a plan for him. And,
Yeah.
And that plan really was to save his people, and that's kind of type like Jesus, like Marvin said.
Right. Yeah, I think that his character basically changed, or that he was God gave him the chance to be reformed, in a sense, right? I mean that he was such an arrogant guy as a prince of Egypt, tried to do things in his way, even as Marvin said, killing that slave master. But later on, that he turned out to be so humble. He even was not sure that he could do this task when the God called him, and he was intimidated. But once he took this mission, he was such a relentless, in a sense. How do you go? He's such a dedicated, self-sacrificing, passionate, and loyal to God, and so patient. It's amazing how many times these people, called Moses that you are, killing us. That taking to the Moab, long places, no water, no food, and Moses is always in front of them, accused. But he, instead of that accusing and blaming that people, he tried to defend them and save them. So yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so second question, what happened at the water of Meribah, Kadesh in the desert with Zen? Do you know the story that Moses hit the rock twice, right? Why didn't God allow Moses to enter the promised land despite his loyalty to God and dedicated service on behalf of Israelites? And another question is, why did God allow people who showed disbelief in God to enter Canaan, on the other hand? So this is, okay, so Marvin, could you read it out?
Yeah, it's a remarkable story. And it's interesting because Ellen White in this chapter identifies this event as Moses' only sin. Now, obviously, he had sinned, he had murdered the slave master, and so on and so forth. So I think she's really talking about his only sin from the time he was called by God to lead the people, which to me is amazing, right? That, you know, through the 40 years and all that time, you know, going to and from Egypt, that was identified as Moses' only sin. So that definitely does bring in the question, hey, you know, is that fair? Is it just that he made one mistake and then he's denied the cherished dream, the hope, right? The promised land. So for him, the promised land he would never experience it. You know, I think that the answer, at least partially, has to do with the bigger impact on others when someone in leadership, especially in spiritual leadership, sins, right? And that, you know, because it's on full display, and it truly was, right? All the people were clamoring, and then he got up, you know, in front of the people, and you know, also it's not like he said, well, okay, you hit the rock twice instead of once, or it was a pretty significant sin in terms of what happened, right? God told him, you know, just, you know, go and speak to the water, and it'll flow, and it'll provide for the people. And it's the one time that Moses lost his temper. But what he said before striking the rock is what was particularly harmful in terms of what it could mislead the people to believe in. Because he said, must we, you know, bring forth water from this rock, right? So then by hitting it, first of all, by not speaking to it and hitting it instead, he disobeyed God. By hitting it twice, he's exhibiting his anger. And by saying, must we do this, he was usurping the power of God and gaining the glory, the credit for this miracle, right? So what could happen there is, first of all, he's setting the example of anger versus patience and love. And two, you know, when he puts it that way, people could easily say, oh, this man, you know, has power to do miracles and we should worship him, and misrepresenting God's character, as well as, you know, taking away the authority of God, right? So when that happened, there had to be a very public and significant and powerful consequence to that sin, so that it would correct the harm that had caused to the nation of Israel, especially when they're finally ready to enter the land of Canaan and be God's representative nation. So I think that's why, you know, something as significant as, you know, all the people then would know, hey, we get to go to Canaan, and our beloved leader, you know, has to go up, you know, by himself, you know, presumably to die or to be banished, and that had to the power of that lesson, that consequence, that discipline, is what was necessary to correct the harm that had occurred with that sin.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Yeah, so there are a couple of implications, I think. it is true that all the old generations who disobeyed died, right? Miriam died, Aaron died, and Moses died. So the only two adults allowed to enter is Caleb and Joshua. So Moses was actually not allowed to go into the Canaan, the promised land. And that's knowing that who Moses was and what he did, it's significant, that decision by God. And as Marvin said, I think that's a huge implication in it, that as NNG White says, that God is loving, but God is righteous. And this event is not only going to the promised land, but actually it's a kind of a symbolic that for us to enter into the heaven, right? So I think there is that decision, God's decision shows his character and who God is, and what's he expects from us. Crystal and John, do you have any more comment on this one? What do you think?
Go ahead, Chris.
No, please.
No, I was thinking about the sin and how Ellen G. White said it was his only sin. It kind of it took me a little bit of time to kind of understand that, I think, and it's something that I struggle with, because I think as Marvin said, I think it's after the fact that Jesus called him, right? So that again probably is kind of the type, right? Because when God called him, he probably said, okay, this is a new you versus what the old you was, right? And it's amazing that that even after that, God held Moses to the measure of his law, right? Because Jesus hadn't come yet, right? So I think that really shows that God had to be fair, and he had to show as Moses an example, right?
Okay, so let me ask this question. So it's a part of the question, but then why did God allow people who he rebelled and he complained to God that why you didn't give us water, and then Moses was lost temper and actually punished by God. But those people who showed disbelief allowed to be in Canaan. Why do you think it was?
Well, I think it's kind of explained in the chapter, right? That Moses is a type of Jesus, right? And that he kind of sacrificed himself to allow others that have this belief. So I think God showed that, hey, this is an example that will set for you guys. That's kind of the way I understand.
But is it though true that none of us are perfect, right? None of us, nobody, including Moses. Yeah, none of them. So the entering the Canaan or promised land is God's grace. And what do you think that if I say it was a blessing for Moses to die there?
Yeah.
How would you say it?
Thought about that. Go ahead.
I was just asking, how would you mean that? Like repaying for the one sin somehow as a counteroffer?
Well, that the Bible especially picked up that this sin. Because of this, the God said that you are not allowed to be in the promised land. So yes, that's true that the God picked up especially this sin, because as Marvin said, I think that he was a leader, he was a type, and that there was an implication to other people. And so that in a sense that it might be the best thing that Moses died over there, and then that let the Joshua to lead, after this. Now that how did Moses feel? That's a different story. right? And let's move on, because this question that comes back again. How did Moses feel about God's decision, and how did God comfort him? Why could not God give him the second chance? What implications and message does this story have to us? This question is kind of related to the question that I asked to Marvin. But how do you think that Moses felt about God's order? This one, Christo, can you read?
Oh,
No,
okay.
I think John was handling this one.
Oh, John is sorry. Yeah, John. Sorry. Yeah.
It's not wrong.
Yeah.
No, I think Moses probably felt very sad about his decision to rebuke God like that, and I think it's striking that it wasn't that difficult to God, right? Striking the rock was what the first example was, versus God telling him to talk to the rock. Right? I'm sure he had deep sorrow in his heart, and I think he felt probably, in some ways, probably it was unfair. But God explained to him that, hey, look, this was my law, and you broke it, and my wish and my words are my words, right? I think it was pretty clear, and I think ultimately, though, like the way that Moses stood up to his people and explained to them what was going to be, right? So it showed a good example of his leadership, and that second chance for his people was going to come through him dying, essentially, right? So,
yeah, Moses was actually that pleaded to God after God said to this, and he pleaded that let me enter into the promised land, because I see that you are enhanced power and hand, and I see that you. So please give me second chance. And what God said, do you remember?
No soup for you.
Yeah, God said that there are several interpretations actually in this Bible verse. In New International Version said that's enough.
it's enough for you.
Yeah, that's enough. But actually, if you look at the other, the King James or others, it says, let it suffice for you. So actually what God said is that you are what do you say? You are blessed enough. Yeah, you have enough. Yeah, that's what
it's when this question and this issue made me think about when Jesus was on the cross. And of course he's God and he knows, but we understand that when he looked into what the future, he just saw a darkness, because he was just profoundly damaged, by the onset of the entire world's sins on his shoulders, right? And Jesus asked God, he said, is it possible for this cup to pass from me, right? And that always kind of surprised me, because like, oh, come on, you're God, you're asking, that, for a chance to not have to do this, right? But I've come to understand that's how devastating and scary and agonizing, the sin was, as Jesus was looking at what was going to happen. He was going to bear the sin of the world. But then he says, but, according to your will, right? And so kind of, I know it's not a perfect match, but when I think of Moses saying, hey, God, can I have a second chance here, God? And God says, in essence, my grace is sufficient for you. So, let's no, the answer is no. But then what I thought was interesting was that as he was making his way up to the mountain, instead of thinking that's so unfair, everything I've done, right? Like one mistake, right? He was searching his heart, right? Was focused on his sin, and that on his way up the mountain, he was examining it and wondering, is this sin going to separate me from God, right?
Right.
And then, just like in the way he didn't blame God, right? He also found his reassurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I have repented of this sin, and God's forgiven me, and my faith in the promised Messiah is sufficient.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So to me, Moses experienced all the emotions that we would experience, but because of his faith and trust in the justice of God, right? He didn't dwell on blaming or being, and he also didn't go the opposite way and say, I'm lost and, I have no, I'm crushed by my guilt and I'm separated from God. I have no assurance of salvation. He had that assurance of salvation.
Yeah.
So
in
a way, it's a type of what happened with Jesus on the cross. It's also a type of what happens with us as believers as we come to know and trust the character of God. And then, in relation to our sin, and believing that he'll restore us.
Yeah, thank you, Marvin. Yeah, actually, that the Deuteronomy was written after God gave this decision. The entire Deuteronomy is a message from Moses to the remaining Israelites, to be guided by Joshua to enter Promised Land, and he wrote the songs blessing the Israelites. Right? He all giving all the warnings given by God, to convey to the Israelites at the end to make sure they'll be happy. That the people blessed by God in the Promised Land, although he will be left behind. Now that the next question is related to this one, but okay, so Marvin touched it, but God told Moses to go up to Mount Pisgah across from Jericho by himself and die there. He was 120 years old, but his eyes were not weak and his strength was not gone, meaning he was healthy. Okay. If God asks you to depart from your family and friends and go up to the top of Mount Rainier and die there alone, how do you feel? And what do you think was in Moses' mind? And Marvin touched it, but this question, Crystal, since you had a similar experience, I think.
Yeah. So I also had some similar, like you say, when I was 25 years old, I felt that was God's calling. So I had to leave my family and go up in a mountain and actually live for my whole life and die there. That was the intention. So I think I believe it's a very hard decision to it's like uprooting a tree, like completely ripping all your relationships and going to be by yourself and start a new life, or for Moses' case, end his life. That takes a tremendous faith. That takes a strong believing. So Moses had to. He had this great relationship with God and knew that that's what he wanted him to do. Still, it's very hard to sever all the ties with your current life and just abandon everybody you loved, especially the whole nation that he was leading.
Yeah, he had his kids, his wife, and he needed to leave those people behind. And the order to die alone on the top of the mountain.
Yeah. nobody to comfort him on his last hours, especially for somebody that was a public figure like Moses, a leader of a whole nation, and he had a family. To die alone was more hard than somebody that didn't have anybody anyway.
Right.
And that looks like it's kind of a payment for his mistakes. And it shows to us that every action has consequences. Every decision we make has consequences eventually. Even if we don't pay for them immediately, at some point we will have to.
Okay. Thank you. You know that we, especially Asians, or everybody, wish that we can die at the last moment, surrounded by the families, right? Peacefully. Yeah. So actually, God asked Moses to go up to the mountain and die. Yet, I do not take this as a punishment. Actually, I think this was a blessing for him. I don't know, how do you feel, you guys? But and do you have any comment, Marvin and John? If don't, that I move on to the next question because it's related.
No, I mean, I think God still blessed him. You know, at the end, he still saw Canaan before he died, right? So that was a huge blessing for him to get that. I think and that one-on-one with God and his understanding that, hey, God still said, I'm still gonna be with you, even though this is your punishment, right? And I think that's the realization before he died. I think that was a huge blessing. So
Yeah.
In my head,
Yeah. Okay. So Marvin, do you have anything?
So I agree, and I'm not sure who's handling number 5, but I agree that what Moses eventually got, right, in terms of the vision on top of Mount Pisgah, was actually far superior to what he would have received simply marching into Canaan with the others. You had asked, is this a blessing? And it probably was. It's not as if, those first years in Canaan were easy, right? There was, a lot of warring and fighting and hardship, bloodshed. That probably was better led out by Joshua. But I think what God gave him on the Mount, Pisgah, the vision, not just of Canaan at that time, but what it would become in the glory of, the days of Israel. And then, even the decline of Israel and the captivity and, everything that went on. I loved this chapter because it was kind of like a miniature great controversy. It's like, the whole span of history from that time entering Canaan all the way to the second coming. What better gift could there be, right? The fact that he wasn't surrounded by his wife and his kids in some ways is appropriate because, here on this earth, that's the most important human relationships that we have, right? But when we enter into eternity, that it's not necessarily going to be, right? It's going to be about us in being reunited with our Creator. So what eventually happened with Moses was very intimately between him and God, and I think what he experienced on Mount Pisgah was really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah. So actually next question was that at the peak of Mount Pisgah, what did Moses see and what did God show him? And why did God allow him to have such vision? Now that, let me ask this to Christo, but just let you know, and that the Bible doesn't say that Moses God showed him the future. Bible just said that God let Moses see that across the Jordan, the land, the Israelites are going to enter, and then Moses peacefully died. That's what the Bible said. But Ellen White specifically said that God allowed to Moses to see what's coming, what kind of fate that's waiting for Israelites, and even that Jesus' first coming and his suffering and his death and so forth. So, Crystal, that why do you think God allowed him to see this vision?
I agree with Marvin. Pretty much touched all of these points. It was like a gift for me. That what I understand is, you're not going to enter the land, but at least here is the vision. Here is, because you have so much favor in front of me, in front of God. At least see, whether just present or with a vision of the whole future of it, what it is going to be like. So on the one hand, it's like punishing him for not entering the land, but on the other, at least take this, because God is forgiving. I have to punish you, but I also love you. So here is another gift instead of the one that I am not allowing you to enter.
Okay.
Like solacing, like giving him solace.
John, do you have any comment?
I mean, I think showing Moses the future and Jesus' coming and death really, I think, showed that, that's the only way that God could forgive him, right? That's why God had forgiven him, right? And that realized, and that's kind of beautiful, right? I think it showed, hey, this is where you're going, but this is why I brought you here, and the reason why the Savior is the only reason you're being saved, right? Otherwise, you would be dead to your sin. Right?
Okay.
So I think, and then fulfilling that prophecy in front of him, I think before that, that what Jesus did, those acts that Jesus did, why he would be saved.
Right.
I think that's the great blessing that he got, and nothing that his family could have ever received from God.
Yeah, actually, that he missed that physical promised land, but he was allowed to enter into promised land even before all the others, because he was resurrected, right? And resurrected because he believed Jesus. And that's why we know that God showed him the future. And that's a proof. Okay, so that here Cassie is saying, I agree with Kosuke. I think by this time Moses was probably sick and tired of these people. Maybe he wanted the solitude and peace of God. Deep in the mountain, alone with God, he loves. Probably was his happy place. Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, and I'm a hiker and climber, so I share that comment quite a lot. Okay. Yeah. So actually,
by the way, Kosuke, I think you'd be the only one to be able to make it all the way up to the top of Rainier before dying on the way.
Hey, I was thinking about taking you up there.
It's a good example.
Good point.
Just the base camp, not all the way to the top. I could go to base camp and then lay down and expire. But
well, maybe that we can plan to go up to the peak someday. Yeah, together. Yeah.
It would be lovely.
Yeah. Okay, so next question. So God gave a new life to Moses by resurrecting him from the grave. Satan claimed his body, but Jesus said, the Lord rebuke you. This is Jude chapter 1:9. Why was Moses allowed to be resurrected despite his sin as claimed by Satan? Moses and Elijah appeared in front of Jesus and his three disciples, James, John, and Peter. What do you think conversation happened among them? Okay, this is an interesting question. Marvin, can you lead up?
Yeah, this is a great question, and just a beautiful, beautiful story, and very, I think, illuminating as far as the whole salvation plan for us. Now, we know that several people were a type of Jesus. Moses was, we've talked about that. David was, right? But at some point, these are still human beings, and there's only one Jesus, right? So, Satan said, all right, I claim this human being as mine because before he died, he sinned, right, in a pretty significant, important way, and therefore he's my property. I now have authority, jurisdiction over him. And Jesus said, the Lord rebuke you, right? Meaning, actually, he didn't have to, get down in the dirt and argue with Satan, because God ultimately has the authority, right? And he just simply said, the Lord rebuke you. But what we understand the justice about in Moses being able to be resurrected and go to heaven is because he had forgiveness over all of his sins, the sin of murder, all the sins he committed as a prince of Egypt, and even this very important, impactful sin as the leader of Israel. He repented of that sin, and he had faith in the promise of the Messiah, who's Jesus Christ, and that sacrifice, right, that the whole temple service and the sacrificial system pointed toward,
right,
would be what would cover and blot out that sin, right? So Satan says, he's mine, and maybe that's true, but because of the Messiah, he's God's,
right,
and that's why he was able to be resurrected. And I think it's kind of an example of there has to be consequences to our sin. If there isn't, then then there's no order to the universe. It's actually just kind of like Newton's law of physics, right? The apple falls and hits the ground, right? The apple doesn't fall and then just stays suspended there, from the branch. So when a sin occurs, then the natural consequences of the sins have to follow. But God's grace is so sufficient. It's more than sufficient. It's bountiful. So, this is an example, right? When the consequence for Moses' sin was denial of his entry into the land of Canaan, which was his heart's desire, so much so that he begged God to reconsider. But it was, in retrospect, such a paltry hope and wish, right? It's almost like he just had blinders on, just a tunnel vision, because for 40 years, as a human being, he's like, oh, I yearn for entering onto this promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. And that might be so great. I mean, kind of like, oh man, I wish I had this great car. I see it in the advertisements and I imagine myself in it. It's so fast, it's so exciting. And you finally get it and you're excited about it for a couple of weeks, but then at some point it's just transportation again, right? Whereas what God gave him was not just a view of the land of Canaan, but a view of what the much bigger prize, right? Because he safely guided the nation of Israel, God's people, from slavery through the wilderness to the brink of the promised land. It's not just their occupation of the promised land that was the end point, the point of it all. The point of it all was that the God's people would be preserved, and from that people would come Jesus Christ, and from Jesus Christ would come the gospel, and then from the gospel everyone could become the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, and that would lead to ultimately the second coming. And he could see all that, and what a great that's not a consolation prize. It's it's instead of the Porsche you're hoping to get, you're getting like the SpaceX rocket ship, right? It's something that's what God does, right? And to me it was just a great story. When I think it's a good example of why the spirit of prophecy is such a gift, right? I think, you see the kind of basic outlines of it. You say, yeah, there had to be consequences for that grave sin on Moses' part. And part of us, the human part, feels like, oh, that's not really fair. He didn't get to go into heaven. He had to go die by himself, with one little glimpse. But through the spirit of prophecy, we see a deeper and richer picture of what God gave to Moses.
Right.
And then we know, from the Bible that he was, I think it's just Elijah, Elisha, in Enoch who were translated, and I think it's only Moses who died and was resurrected, and lives in heaven now.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yes. So that Satan was the source of the sin, and even that when Israelites revolted and blamed the God of Moses, there was a Satan always behind, right? Causing that that the unsatisfaction and disbelief in their hearts. So actually, Satan was to be blamed. Although it's true that we are independent, we have our own free will, and we choose, and we often choose sin. But I hear that Jesus was God and his Savior, so he could blame Satan because Satan was a source of sin. But he say, I'm the person who saved. Actually, I'm the person who sacrificed myself for people. So he has all the right to say. Now that one question that still not answered is, when Moses and Elijah appeared in front of Jesus and his 3 disciples, what do you think? Those are at the time of the transfiguration, what kind of conversation? There isn't any answer in the Bible, I'll tell you. Okay, so happened, do you think? Okay, do you have any comment, John, about that?
I think they probably had a conversation about what he saw, what was coming, and the realization that, hey, the people of Earth that struggle, he had to understand that why is it so hard, right? when the result of obedience is such a quite great thing, right? So I think at the end of that conversation, it must have been a probably eye-opening thing for Moses and those.
Also, okay. So you are saying that at that Mount of Transfiguration, they are talking about Moses and Elijah's experience, or?
Well, no. I mean, I think just the realization. Moses' probably realization that the law was, he was basically given a gift, really, right? And how that gift probably was, similar to Elijah, like how he was received.
What do you think, Christoph?
I mean, what my comment was for this occasion, there is when Jesus was going to Caesarea of Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people think I am? And there was a confusion. Some think you are Moses, some think you are one of the great prophets. And this moment, it is a clearing of that confusion, because here is Jesus and here is Moses and here is Elijah, 3 different people. And he has 3 witnesses to prove that I am not Moses, I am not Elijah. As for what they were saying, this is so amazing. What could they, like? Moses prophesied for Jesus coming, and then here you are in person. What I said thousands of years ago, and it should have been so emotional and so strong moment, that conversation. We can't fathom what they said.
Right. Because they met before, right? When Moses and Elijah were alive, Jesus was the person who encouraged them to go through. Do you remember what happened at the end of Elijah's life? He was chased by the Isabel. He left. He fled, right? And he said, "Ask God, please take me away. I would like to die." And God took, guided him to the Mount Horeb, and talked in a small voice to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And then asked Elijah to give that his power to Elisha. You remember that? Yeah.
Double.
Yeah, double portion. So when they were alive, Jesus was encouraging them to have a faith in him. Now here, 3 of them, and Jesus was in challenge, right? Yeah. So as Crystal said, that the voice came from the heaven that this is my son, believe him. That's the God's acknowledgement who he was, and definitely this was a moment that those three chosen disciples saw who Jesus was, and there was additional proof for them. But I think that this was a moment that they reunited, 3 of them, in a sense. One, Elijah, who represents people who go straight alive to heaven, and Moses, who represent the people who die but taken to the heaven, right? So I believe that Jesus was encouraged by them. Yeah. And Jesus was a heavier burden carrying, and when goes through that ultimate challenge. So I think that this was, as Crystal said, I am sure it was a touching moment. I mean, that it was, imagine that Moses, who died on the Mount of Pisgah, saved by Jesus, now see him in this, moment. Yeah. What do you think, Martin?
Well, that's, I thought of, with the expanded vision that Ellen White gives us about what Moses was able to see, right? That he could say, hey, look, God or you, right? You showed me this very moment, right? And of course, Jesus came as man, right? And so I think, there were limitations, as Jesus, in his, iteration as a human being, that he would not necessarily have the consciousness and the knowledge actually in that brain of, everything that had been shown to Moses, for instance. So I think that, there's a beautiful kind of closing of that circle where Moses is given that vision to say, hey, this is the fruit, going to be the fruit of all of your labor. And then he's resurrected, and along with Elijah, they get to come in and then comfort, and encourage the man of Jesus, and say that, God will not forsake you, that this, this will result in, in the salvation of all of humanity.
Yeah. You remember the story that Moses needed to lift a snake on a tree, and Jesus once said that as Moses lifted the snake, I need to be lifted up. Yeah. So Jesus knew, and Moses knew about it. Yeah. Okay. So the last question. Hold on. So to everybody, how do you describe Moses' life, and what lesson did we learn today? Okay. John, do you have any?
Yeah, I think Moses' life, I describe it as a sinner who was converted, who sinned again, which we all do, and I think ultimately forgiven and taken to heaven. Right. I look at his life as an example, hopefully of mine. Hopefully, that me, even as a sinner, was converted and still sin today. Right. That I have hope to be saved, and to see Jesus and Moses and Elijah and have that conversation with them when I get to heaven. Right. That I look forward to that. That's
amen to that. Yeah. Okay, Crystal.
It was an amazing, tumultuous, interesting life, going through lots of phases, and that shows that everybody can not just sit in their status and be content, but try and change and improve. Moses went from top to bottom and then to top again. So we can all follow that and not stay in the bottom if we get to the bottom, or always aim for higher.
Amen to that. Yeah, Marvin.
Yeah, it's a testament, right, to, you know, how one's character can be transformed, so that over time you can actually do what's unfathomable, right? The thought of leading the stiff-necked people through the wilderness for 40 years and to only sin once, you know, at the end, it to me just betokens how I mean, Moses, one of the few people who interacted with God face to face, how transformative of his character that was. But that even so, you know, we're still beset by sin, and even in the face of a profound sin right at the end of his life, you know, he clung to the promise of salvation, and salvation was restored to him. It's a beautiful story, very inspiring to me.
Yeah, amen to that. Thank you. Thank you for everyone. Yes, I think what I learned is that how amazing God's plan is. You know, I mean, how Moses did know that his life turned out to be that way, even at the last moment, And I see that God's amazing love and grace in this story to everybody. So, yeah. Thank you for your participation, and let's have a closing prayer. Greg. Heavenly Father, Lord, praise your name. Thank you for giving us this chance to study your words. You are beautiful. You are so loving, and we are so blessed that having relationship with you. Bless that each family members and friends in our church, and continue to guide us. We know there are people who are having health issues and so forth, but please put your healing hands on those people. Bless this Sabbath day and let us have your rest. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay,
Amen.
so everybody, thank you for attendance, and we have a worship service starting 11:15, so please join us. And also next Sabbath class is chapter 44. We are continuing to study, so please